On September 14, 2010, a devoted mother of three named Emily Carter recorded a video in her home in Des Moines, Iowa. In this video, she meticulously documented her family's possessions and assets, expressing her concern for her children's future. Hello, this is Emily Carter, and today is September 14th, 2010 at 3:45 p.m. I'm doing this to ensure that everything is documented, just in case anything happens to me or my family. I hope we can all live happily, but I want to cover my bases, she said, her voice steady but edged with anxiety. The video was made at the urging of her close friend, who was worried about Emily's tumultuous marriage to a man named Mark. For years, their relationship had been fraught with tension and instability. During the recording, Emily revealed glimpses of her troubled life. Most of the things here were bought using my credit card. Mark has made some questionable decisions and it's affected us financially. I just want my kids to be safe. They deserve a stable home, she stated, pausing to glance nervously at the door. There was an incident last year where he got angry and broke some of our things. I'm worried that if things go south, he might try to take everything away from me. Though Emily was in the process of consulting with an attorney about potential separation, she and Mark continued to live under the same roof. As weeks turned into months, Emily's concerns grew, and she became increasingly aware of the risks that came with her situation. On December 2nd, 2010, nearly 3 months after Emily made the video, she attended a family gathering with her 3 children. Everything seemed fine. They laughed, shared stories, and played games. Emily even shared her plans to take the children on a trip to visit their grandparents the following week. However, on the evening of December 3rd, a neighbor reported hearing loud arguments coming from the Carter home. By the time the sun rose on December 4th, Emily was missing. When her family couldn't reach her, they became alarmed and contacted the police, initiating a search. Mark was quick to claim that Emily had gone out for a late-night walk, but the police found his story suspicious. A search of the house revealed signs of struggle, with furniture overturned and a broken lamp lying in the living room. Mark insisted that everything was fine, but the evidence told a different story. Authorities began to question Mark more closely. His demeanor was calm, but there was an unsettling detachment in the way he spoke about Emily's disappearance. He claimed to have no idea where she had gone or why she would leave without telling anyone. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's family became desperate for answers. Mark's inconsistencies raised alarm bells, and police began to investigate him more thoroughly. They discovered that Mark had taken out a life insurance policy on Emily just weeks before her disappearance, an act that further solidified their suspicions. Emily is just taking some time for herself, Mark told reporters, but friends and family who knew Emily were unconvinced. They described her as a loving mother who wouldn't abandon her children. It didn't take long for the investigation to turn its focus on Mark, and police sought to uncover the truth. As investigators dug deeper, they learned about a dark incident from the previous year. Emily had filed a police report after a heated argument with Mark that escalated into violence. In the report, she detailed how he had pushed her and threatened her life during an outburst. Although she had chosen not to press charges at the time, the evidence suggested a pattern of controlling and abusive behavior. With the investigation gaining traction, authorities began to examine Mark's actions in the days leading up to Emily's disappearance. They discovered that he had taken an unplanned trip to a remote cabin in the woods about 2 hours away from Des Moines, shortly after Emily went missing. This was a place he had visited before, but it raised red flags for investigators who now viewed Mark as a prime suspect. The search for Emily intensified, but despite extensive efforts, no trace of her was found. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Mark maintained his innocence, stating he had nothing to hide. However, the mounting evidence began to weigh heavily against him. In a twist that shocked everyone, Emily's sister, Karen, began to receive strange messages from an unknown number, claiming to know where Emily was. The messages were cryptic and unsettling, hinting that Emily had encountered serious danger. Karen brought this to the police's attention, and they investigated the number, but it led to a dead end. As months passed with no sign of Emily, Mark continued to claim he was innocent, even going so far as to conduct interviews on local news stations, pleading for his wife to return home. "Emily, if you're watching this, please come back to us. Your children miss you," he said, his tone a mix of desperation and frustration. But behind closed doors, Mark's behavior grew more erratic. He started drinking heavily and distancing himself from friends and family. As the pressure mounted, his mental state seemed to deteriorate. Police had a surveillance team monitoring him, and they noticed that he was frequently seen driving to the remote cabin he had visited after Emily's disappearance. One night, under the cover of darkness, police decided to conduct a stakeout near the cabin. As they watched Mark's movements, they spotted him carrying large trash bags out of the cabin and tossing them into a nearby ravine. They couldn't see what was inside, but the act alone was enough to warrant further investigation. The following day, police obtained a search warrant and combed the area around the cabin. When they searched the ravine, they discovered evidence that would change the course of the investigation. Inside the trash bags were items belonging to Emily: clothing, personal belongings, and even a diary that she had kept. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation and led to Mark being arrested. During his interrogation, Mark's demeanor changed dramatically. Initially calm, he became defensive and agitated when pressed about the contents of the bags. His alibi began to crumble under the scrutiny of the police, and they confronted him with the evidence they had collected. "I didn't do anything wrong," Mark insisted, but his words fell on deaf ears. Investigators had gathered enough evidence to charge him with Emily's murder, but the case was far from straightforward. With no body and no eyewitnesses, it would be a challenging case to prosecute. In the months that followed, the courtroom became a battleground as the prosecution and defense argued over the evidence. Mark maintained his innocence, claiming that he had simply collected Emily's belongings after she decided to leave him. But the jury wasn't convinced, and the weight of the evidence began to shift in the prosecution's favor. As the trial progressed, Emily's family and friends stood united, attending every session and providing support for one another. They shared stories about Emily, painting a picture of a woman who would never abandon her children or her life. Her absence was felt deeply, and the emotional toll was evident in the courtroom. One key moment during the trial came when the prosecution presented a chilling piece of evidence, a recording of Emily's video where she had documented her concerns about Mark. As her words echoed in the courtroom, the jury watched intently, and the impact of her chilling foresight hung heavily in the air. "I'm recording this just in case anything happens," Emily had said, her voice trembling. The jury couldn't help but feel the weight of her words as they realized how prescient she had been in her fears about her marriage. After weeks of testimonies and deliberations, the jury finally reached a verdict. Mark was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in tears as Emily's family embraced each other, relieved that justice had been served, even if it came too late to save Emily. In the aftermath, Emily's family focused on honoring her memory. They established a foundation in her name, aimed at helping victims of domestic violence and raising awareness about the signs of abuse. Every year, they held events to support other families affected by similar tragedies, ensuring that Emily's legacy would live on. Despite the resolution of the case, the mystery of Emily's remains lingered. Her family was determined to find her, and they continued to search for her body, hoping that one day they would be able to lay her to rest. The years passed, but Emily's story remained alive in the hearts of those who knew her. Friends and family gathered annually to commemorate her life, sharing stories and memories and shining a light on the importance of support for victims of domestic abuse. Mark's actions on that fateful night would never be forgotten. His cruelty had shattered a family, leaving behind a trail of grief and unanswered questions. While the legal battle had ended, the emotional scars remained, a constant reminder of the darkness that can exist behind closed doors. As for Emily's video, it took on a haunting significance. Each time her family watched it, they felt the depth of her love for her children and the pain of her fears. Her words served as a reminder of the reality many face in abusive relationships, and they became advocates for change, determined to make a difference in the world. Though Emily Carter was never found, her spirit lived on through the lives she touched, the children she loved, and the mission her family embraced. They refused to let her memory fade, ensuring that her story would serve as a beacon of hope for others who might find themselves in similar situations. And as the years went by, her family held on to the hope that one day they would finally find Emily and bring her home, giving her the peace she had sought for so long. Story the end.
Story number 2.
#, the mysterious disappearance of Lisa Jansen. Lisa Jansen was a 22-year-old woman from Thunder Bay, Ontario. In early September of 2013, she decided to take a break from her routine and booked a trip to Toronto with her two friends. They arrived at Toronto Pearson International Airport and checked into a lively downtown hotel, excited about their weekend getaway. On the second night of their stay, Lisa's friends decided to rest early, but Lisa was feeling adventurous. She was eager to explore the bustling nightlife of Toronto, so she put on her favorite outfit and set out on her own, telling her friends she would catch a few late-night attractions. That was the last time anyone saw her. When Lisa didn't return to the hotel the following morning, her friends grew worried and contacted her family. Lisa's mother, Susan, received the call and instantly felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. She immediately reached out to the Toronto Police Service. Hours turned into days, and as the search for Lisa continued, anxiety filled the air. The police began their investigation by reviewing surveillance footage from the hotel and nearby locations. In the footage, Lisa was seen leaving the hotel at approximately 10:30 p.m., her laughter echoing through the lobby as she waved goodbye to her friends. That was the last confirmed sighting of her. Days later, Lisa's family learned from investigators that she had made a phone call while she was out that night. The contents of that call would soon surface, raising even more concerns. A recording captured her speaking with an unknown man, sounding increasingly agitated. "Where are we going?" Lisa asked, her voice shaky. "We're heading to a party. Just relax," the man replied, his tone unnervingly calm. "I don't want to go to a party. I told you I just wanted to see the city." Lisa protested, her distress evident. "Trust me, it'll be fun. Just a quick stop first." "Quick? Where?" "Don't worry about it. You'll love it," he assured her, the tension palpable through the line. The police released this phone conversation to the public in hopes that someone might recognize the voice. However, many felt the man's tone was deceptive, masking something far more sinister. Lisa's mother begged the police to escalate the investigation, but they brushed off her concerns, suggesting Lisa might just be enjoying her time in the city. As days turned into a week with no sign of Lisa, the situation took a grave turn. On September 14, 2013, a week after she disappeared, a group of hikers stumbled upon a desolate area on the outskirts of Toronto. Their initial curiosity quickly turned to horror as they discovered what appeared to be personal belongings scattered across the ground, items that would later be confirmed as belonging to Lisa. The police were alerted immediately. A search team was dispatched, but their efforts yielded no further clues about her whereabouts. Lisa's case was gaining national attention and the media started covering her story extensively, but as days went by, hope began to wane. Meanwhile, Susan Jansen fought tirelessly to keep the story alive. She organized vigils, distributed flyers, and pleaded with anyone who would listen to help find her daughter. The police, still reluctant to take action, cited lack of evidence and unconfirmed sightings as reasons for their slow response. As public interest grew, so did rumors. Some alleged that Lisa had been spotted in various neighborhoods throughout Toronto, while others claimed to have seen her with different men. Most of these sightings were unverified and led to dead ends, leaving Lisa's family increasingly frustrated. Finally, a month after Lisa's disappearance, a break in the case came when an anonymous tipster reached out to the police. The caller claimed to have seen Lisa on the night she went missing, stating she was in a car with a man in a dark sedan. According to the tip, they had been parked near an abandoned warehouse just outside the city. This new lead prompted a search of the area, but nothing conclusive was found. The investigation dragged on, and Lisa's case slowly fell off the radar. By December, Susan felt overwhelmed. The lack of progress was demoralizing, and the police appeared to have grown complacent. But Susan refused to give up. In January 2014, she held a press conference speaking directly to the camera with tears in her eyes. "My daughter is missing, and we will not stop looking for her. Someone knows something. We need answers," she pleaded, her voice breaking. The renewed attention led to another surge of tips. A woman came forward, claiming she had been at a bar near the hotel the night Lisa disappeared. She recalled seeing Lisa arguing with a man who appeared overly aggressive. He was much older than her. "It didn't sit right with me," the witness stated. The description of the man matched that of the individual in the recording, raising new questions. With this new lead, the police began a more thorough investigation into potential suspects. They looked into local records and questioned known offenders, but nothing substantial came from their efforts. Frustration mounted for Lisa's family and supporters, who believed the investigation was being hindered by systemic issues, including biases against missing Indigenous women. In March 2014, a few months later, a body was discovered in a remote area north of Toronto. The remains were later identified as Lisa Jansen. The news sent shockwaves through the community and reignited the public's outrage regarding the police handling of missing persons cases, particularly involving young women. The circumstances surrounding her death remained unclear. The autopsy revealed no immediate signs of foul play, but the police could not rule out homicide. Lisa's case became part of a larger conversation about violence against women, particularly Indigenous women, who often faced significant barriers in law enforcement response. A year later, during a public forum on missing persons, Lisa's story resurfaced once again. Advocacy groups came together to push for policy changes, demanding better training for law enforcement in dealing with cases involving marginalized communities. Susan spoke passionately about the need for systemic change, recounting her daughter's story as an example of what happens when cases are neglected. In the audience, a woman named Michelle raised her hand, sharing her own story of being targeted in a similar way. "I was almost taken too," she said, her voice shaking. "It happens more often than people think." Her bravery inspired others to come forward, each sharing their own harrowing encounters. As public pressure mounted, the police launched a task force aimed specifically at addressing cold cases of missing women, focusing on better coordination with community organizations. They acknowledged that many women, especially from Indigenous backgrounds, had fallen through the cracks due to systemic racism within law enforcement. The investigation into Lisa's case was reopened, but with the passage of time, leads were scarce. A few months later, an informant came forward with information about a man who frequented the bar where Lisa was last seen. He claimed to have witnessed the man in the recording interacting with other young women in the area, often in a predatory manner. Detectives began tracking this individual, hoping he might lead them to additional witnesses. Meanwhile, the public continued to rally around Lisa's memory. Social media campaigns spread her story, and her family sought to raise awareness about the ongoing crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women across Canada. Years passed, and while Lisa's case remained unsolved, her family kept her memory alive. They hosted annual vigils, inviting others to share their stories of loss and resilience. Lisa became a symbol of hope and determination in the fight for justice for all missing women. In September 2018, exactly 5 years after Lisa's disappearance, community gathered to honor her memory. The event was filled with emotional speeches and shared stories, emphasizing the importance of never giving up on those who had vanished. During the gathering, a young girl approached Susan, clutching a flower. "I want to remember Lisa too," she said, her eyes wide with sincerity. Susan knelt down, her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you, sweetheart. We all need to remember her." As the sun set that evening, candles were lit, illuminating the faces of those who had come together in solidarity. They shared laughter, tears, and a commitment to continue fighting for justice. Lisa's spirit was felt in the air, reminding everyone that she would never be forgotten. Though the mystery of Lisa Jansen's disappearance remained unsolved, her legacy lived on. Her family and supporters continued their efforts, determined to bring awareness to the injustices faced by many women, hoping that one day they would find the answers they sought. For now, the case of Lisa Jansen stands as a reminder of the importance of community, resilience, and the ongoing fight against the systemic issues that contribute to the plight of missing and murdered women. Story the end.
Story number 3.
In the summer of 2016, a vlogger named Daniel Astor, who went by the username Desert Nomad on YouTube, posted a comment that would change his life forever. The comment appeared under a video titled "Lost Ruins of the Ancient Southwest, Evidence of Prehistoric Civilizations," a popular conspiracy theory video with millions of views. Daniel's comment stood out amidst the noise. It read, "Y'all think you've seen everything? Not even close. I've been trekking through the New Mexico wilderness for years, and I once stumbled on a hidden cave deep in the Sandia Mountains, unlike anything I've ever seen before. The entrance wasn't normal. It was circular and almost too perfect, as if it had been carved by someone or something. As I approached, I heard this low humming, and my skin started tingling like static electricity was running through me. I didn't dare go in. Something about it wasn't right." I turned back. That's the most bizarre thing I've ever experienced, and I've never been able to find that cave again. The comment blew up overnight. Some people called Daniel a liar and accused him of trying to get views, while others were genuinely intrigued, encouraging him to go back and find the mysterious cave. Intrigued by the attention, Daniel promised his subscribers he would return to the Sandia Mountains and document his journey to find the cave. In August 2016, Daniel uploaded a video titled "The Cave I Can't Find, Searching for the Hidden Doorway." The video began with Daniel standing in front of his white truck preparing for a long hike in the mountains. "Okay guys, today's the day," he said, the camera shaky as he filmed himself. "I'm out here near the foothills of the Sandia Mountains and I'm going to try to retrace my steps. Last time I was here, I found this strange cave, and today I'm going to see if I can find it again. Wish me luck." Daniel started his trek, the video capturing long stretches of scrubland and rugged hills. The mountains loomed in the distance, their rocky faces bathed in the orange glow of the setting sun. As he hiked, Daniel commented on the terrain, pointing out landmarks and strange rock formations. "I remember walking this way last time," he said, panting slightly from the exertion. "The cave was near a bunch of these jagged rocks. This place looks familiar." For hours, he wandered through the wilderness, but despite his best efforts, Daniel couldn't find the cave. His subscribers were disappointed, flooding the comments with criticisms, accusations, and challenges. Some encouraged him to return, while others warned him not to. One comment in particular stood out from the rest. A user by the name of Omega Shadow posted a chilling message. "Don't go looking for that cave again. If you found it once and felt that fear, there's a reason. Some things are better left alone. If you go back, you might not come out." Undeterred, Daniel returned a second time in early October, promising his viewers that he was determined to find the cave no matter what. This time, he brought along his drone to cover more ground and capture aerial footage of the remote areas of the mountain range. In a video titled "The Second Search," revisiting the cave in the Sandias, Daniel seemed more serious. The playful tone of his earlier videos replaced with a sense of grim determination. As he trekked deeper into the mountains, Daniel's camera caught glimpses of strange, unnatural-looking rock formations and shadowy crevices. He paused frequently, scanning the landscape as if searching for a sign, any clue that would lead him back to the cave. "I'm getting close," he said in the video, his voice tense. "I know it's around here somewhere. I can feel it." Hours passed, and just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Daniel's drone captured something odd. In the footage, nestled between two jagged cliffs, was a dark circular hole in the rock, a cave entrance that looked eerily similar to the one Daniel had described in his comment months before. "There it is," he said breathlessly as he watched the footage from his drone's screen. "That's it. I knew I wasn't crazy." Daniel hurried toward the location, his camera bouncing as he rushed over the rough terrain. When he reached the entrance, the same strange sensation he had described in his original comment returned. His skin tingled, and a low humming sound seemed to emanate from the cave. The entrance, perfectly circular, looked unnatural, as if it had been cut with precision. "I don't know what this is," Daniel said, his voice shaky, "but it's real. I'm standing right here in front of it. Should I go in?" The comments section exploded with responses, some urging him to explore the cave, while others begged him to turn back. Daniel was a thrill seeker at heart, and he couldn't resist the pull of the unknown. He strapped on his headlamp and ducked into the cave. The video cut off there. That was the last video Daniel Astor ever posted. He didn't come home that night, and when days passed with no sign of him, his friends and family alerted the authorities. Search and rescue teams scoured the Sandia Mountains for weeks, but no trace of Daniel was ever found. The authorities eventually located his truck, parked at the same spot near the foothills where he had started his hike, but his drone, camera, and all other equipment were missing. The case quickly became a hot topic in online forums and conspiracy circles. Some believed Daniel had fallen victim to the dangers of the desert, dehydration, heat stroke, or an accidental fall. Others believed he had been silenced by something far more sinister. The cave, they theorized, was either a hidden military facility or an ancient, secret location guarded by forces beyond our comprehension. Months passed, and interest in Daniel's disappearance began to fade. But in April 2017, 6 months after he vanished, a strange message appeared in the comments section of his last video. It was from an account named Lost Witness, and simply read, "I warned you, some places aren't meant to be found. The cave took him, and it will take anyone else who tries to find it." The comment sent chills down the spines of those who had followed the case closely. Who was lost witness? How did they know what had happened to Daniel? Was this just an elaborate troll, or was there something more sinister at play? The authorities reopened the investigation after receiving several tips about possible sightings of Daniel in remote areas, but each lead turned up empty. Rumors continued to swirl. Some claimed to have seen Daniel wandering the mountains aimlessly, his clothes torn and his eyes vacant, as if he had been driven mad by whatever he had encountered in the cave. Others said he had never left the cave at all, and that his spirit now haunted the mountains, drawing other adventurers into the same fate. As more hikers ventured into the Sandia Mountains, some reported seeing strange lights at night, hovering near the cliffs where Daniel had last been seen. Others claimed to have heard the same low humming sound he had described, though no one had been able to locate the mysterious circular cave. In September 2017, a group of amateur explorers decided to launch their own investigation into Daniel's disappearance. Armed with better technology and equipment, they ventured into the Sandia Mountains in search of the cave. Days passed with no success, and the team was on the verge of giving up when they found something peculiar. Deep in a narrow crevice, hidden from plain sight, they discovered a backpack that appeared to belong to Daniel. Inside were a few basic supplies: a flashlight, a water bottle, and a journal. The journal, damp and damaged, had only a few legible entries. The final entry, written in shaky handwriting, simply read, "I found it. It's not what I thought. I'm not alone." The explorers reported the discovery to local authorities, but no further evidence was ever found. The backpack, along with the journal, was turned over to Daniel's family, but they declined to release any additional information to the public. As time passed, the story of Daniel Astor's disappearance became yet another unsolved mystery, one of many lost to the unforgiving wilderness. Some people believe he's still out there, alive but forever changed by whatever he encountered in the cave. Others are convinced that he met a tragic end, swallowed by the same mystery that first lured him in. To this day, no one knows for sure what happened to Daniel Astor, the desert nomad. But the cave he sought remains undiscovered, its secrets buried deep within the heart of the Sandia Mountains, waiting for the next adventurer to find it. Story the end.
Story number 4.
On July 15th, 2019, a man named Alex Matthews from Willow Creek, California, contacted the police and reported that his cousin, 28-year-old Claire Larson, had gone missing. Claire, a successful marketing consultant and avid hiker, had been visiting friends in the area for the past week. According to Alex, she had attended a dinner party hosted by a mutual friend, David Weber, earlier that day and had left around 9 p.m. to head back to her Airbnb rental just outside of town. David told police that Claire seemed in good spirits throughout the evening, although she had been drinking a bit of wine and mentioned feeling tired from her earlier hike. Claire had left the gathering alone, insisting she wanted to get some rest before another hike the following morning. But when Alex tried calling her later that night to check in, he never got a response. By 10:30 a.m. the next day, after multiple unanswered texts and calls, Alex began to worry and eventually drove to her Airbnb, only to find her car in the driveway but no sign of Claire. As the investigation began, police interviewed several of Claire's friends, including David and a few other guests who were at the dinner. The last confirmed sighting of Claire was around 9:30 p.m. when David saw her leave his house, walking toward her car. According to his statement, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Claire had waved goodbye, climbed into her rental, and drove off, but no one heard from her after that. The first real clue came from Claire's phone records. Her last known activity on the phone was at 9:50 p.m., when she briefly accessed a hiking app she frequently used. The app showed she had checked the trail conditions at Black Oak Ridge, a popular hiking spot about 15 miles from where she was staying. The strange part was that this location wasn't close to her Airbnb. It was in the opposite direction. Investigators assumed she might have made a spur-of-the-moment decision to go on a night hike, something she had done before, though rarely without telling someone. When police visited Black Oak Ridge the next morning, they found no sign of Claire, but there was an eerie detail. Claire's car, still locked and seemingly untouched, was parked in a small lot near the trailhead. There were no signs of struggle, and nothing inside the car appeared suspicious. Her phone, wallet, and hiking gear were all missing, presumably with her. However, a camera at the trail entrance showed footage of her car arriving at 10:12 p.m., with Claire stepping out and heading into the woods. She was alone. The footage offered no clues beyond that, leaving investigators puzzled. In the days that followed, a massive search effort was launched across Black Oak Ridge. Volunteer searchers, park rangers, and police scoured the trail and surrounding areas, but no one could find any trace of Claire. Search dogs picked up her scent along the trail for the first half mile, but then lost it near a steep ravine that was too dangerous for searchers to explore without specialized equipment. Authorities feared Claire might have slipped and fallen, but there was no solid evidence to support that theory. Then, a week into the search, an unsettling development emerged. One of Claire's close friends, Nina Wells, came forward with information that changed the tone of the investigation. Nina had been hesitant to mention it earlier, but she recalled a disturbing conversation she had with Claire just a few days before her disappearance. Claire had confided in Nina that she felt like someone was following her. She mentioned noticing a man, someone she didn't recognize, show up at various places she had been during her stay in Willow Creek. Claire dismissed it at first, thinking it was just a coincidence, but after spotting him outside her Airbnb on multiple occasions, she began to feel unnerved. Nina said Claire didn't seem overly frightened, but more annoyed by the situation, not wanting to make a big deal out of it. She even joked about how the town's locals were too curious for their own good. Police took this seriously and began re-interviewing witnesses, hoping someone had seen the man Claire mentioned. Unfortunately, no one had noticed anything unusual, and no one could corroborate her story about being followed. Meanwhile, Claire's phone records continued to baffle investigators. The day after her disappearance, between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., her phone had pinged a cell tower not far from the trailhead, even though searchers had been scouring the area at that time. Despite the signal, they couldn't locate the phone, and the records suggested that whoever had the phone might have turned it off soon after. As the days turned into weeks, the case grew colder. Willow Creek, a town known for its tight-knit community, began buzzing with rumors and speculation. Some locals believed Claire had fallen victim to foul play, possibly at the hands of the mysterious man she had mentioned to Nina. Others believed she had gotten lost or injured on the trail, and that her body simply hadn't been found yet. But there were those who entertained wilder theories, stories of strange sightings in the woods, whispers of hidden cults, and even supernatural explanations for her vanishing. A month after Claire's disappearance, the case took another turn when Alex received a cryptic letter in the mail. The letter, postmarked from a nearby town but with no return address, was typed in bold, all-capital letters. It read, "Claire Larson. She is gone. Her body rests beneath the stars, but the water knows. Search where the woods meet the river. Under the broken tree, you will find her there." The police took the letter seriously and began another search, this time focusing on areas near the Willow Creek River. They scoured the banks and surrounding woods, and after days of searching, they found the broken tree mentioned in the letter, an old weathered oak that had fallen during a storm. Just beyond the tree, buried beneath the dirt and leaves, they discovered Claire's body. Her remains were found partially submerged in a shallow section of the river. Despite the ominous tone of the letter, the coroner's report found no clear signs of foul play. Claire had likely drowned, though how she ended up in the river remained a mystery. There were no bruises or other injuries that suggested an attack, and her blood alcohol level was low, ruling out the possibility that she had simply fallen in by accident while intoxicated. The discovery of Claire's body raised more questions than answers. How had her body ended up in the river, miles from the trail where she was last seen? Who had written the letter, and how did they know where to find her? And what happened to Claire between the time she entered the woods and the moment she drowned? Further investigation into the letter yielded no leads. The paper and ink were standard, with no identifying marks, and the typeface was common enough to prevent tracing it to any particular source. The town of Willow Creek was left in a state of unease, unsure whether Claire's death was the result of an accident, suicide, or something far more sinister. As time passed, the police quietly closed the case, labeling Claire's death as an accidental drowning. But many people, including her family, refused to accept that explanation. Alex, in particular, became convinced that someone had lured Claire into the woods that night, though he could never prove it. The fact that her phone had remained active after her death, the strange letter, and the unresolved sightings of the man who had allegedly been following her all pointed to something more nefarious. Willow Creek would never forget the case of Claire Larson, the hiker who vanished without a trace, only to be found in a river weeks later with no clear cause of death. To this day, her disappearance remains a chilling reminder of how even the most serene places can hide dark secrets. Story the end.
Story number 5.
In the spring of 2017, a 29-year-old construction worker from Oregon named Dylan Hartman disappeared under circumstances that have left investigators and his family with more questions than answers. Dylan had always been a hard worker, spending long days on job sites and traveling frequently for work. His relationship with his girlfriend, Tara, had always been a bit tumultuous, but things had become more strained in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. Dylan had been working on a high-profile project in Portland and was often away from home, which created tension between him and Tara. They had a 4-year-old son, Mason, who Dylan adored, but the stress of juggling work and fatherhood, combined with his growing frustration at home, seemed to take its toll. Tara had noticed that Dylan had been acting differently in the months before he vanished. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there were subtle changes in his behavior. He was quieter, often lost in thought, and he'd started drinking more heavily after work. While Tara suspected that something was wrong, she didn't realize just how serious the situation was. On the evening of May 16th, Dylan came home from work looking exhausted. He and Tara exchanged a few words, but the tension between them was palpable. According to Tara, they got into a heated argument over his long hours and his drinking habits. She later told police that during the argument, Dylan became unusually quiet and simply grabbed his car keys, leaving the house without another word. He didn't say where he was going, but it wasn't unusual for him to leave when things got heated, so she assumed he'd cool off and come back later. That was the last time Tara ever saw him. At 11:23 p.m., about 2 hours after leaving his house, Dylan made a bizarre phone call to his best friend, Mike Donovan, who lived just outside of Portland. Mike said that Dylan sounded disoriented and frightened, as though he was in some sort of trouble. He told Mike that he was driving along a rural road near Mount Hood and that his car had run off the road into a ditch. According to Mike, Dylan kept insisting that there were people following him and that they were trying to run him off the road. Mike was confused by the call, as Dylan had never been the paranoid type, and he initially thought his friend might be drunk or high. When he asked Dylan if he had been drinking or taking anything, Dylan vehemently denied it. He just kept repeating that he needed help and that they were after him. Mike agreed to drive out to find Dylan and told him to stay put until he arrived. After hanging up, Mike quickly grabbed his keys and headed out toward the location Dylan had mentioned. As he drove, he called Dylan back several times, but each call either went unanswered or was abruptly disconnected. Growing more concerned, Mike increased his speed, hoping to reach Dylan before anything happened. Meanwhile, at 11:37 p.m., Dylan made a frantic call to 911, which was later released to the public. In the call, Dylan's voice is shaky, and it's clear that something has terrified him. 911, what's your emergency? Please, I need help. I'm on Clover Hill Road near Mount Hood. I crashed my car, and there's people chasing me. Can you see the people now? I can't. They're in the woods. I saw them watching me. Please, they're coming. Sir, are you injured? Do you need medical assistance? No. I just need the police. Please, hurry. Are you in your car right now? No, I'm out of the car. I can't stay in there. They'll find me. Okay, we're sending someone now. Please stay on the line. Please hurry. I think they're here. The call abruptly cuts off after this, leaving dispatchers in confusion. Local deputies were dispatched to the area immediately, but when they arrived about 20 minutes later, there was no sign of Dylan or his car. Mike arrived at the location about the same time as the deputies. He found Dylan's car, a black Ford Explorer, sitting at an awkward angle in a shallow ditch off the side of the road. The car's front end was damaged, but it wasn't a severe crash. It looked like Dylan had simply lost control and veered off the road. The doors were unlocked, and the keys were still in the ignition, but there was no sign of Dylan anywhere. His phone was found on the passenger seat, which explained why Mike's repeated calls had gone unanswered. Deputies and Mike searched the immediate area around the car, calling out Dylan's name, but there was no response. The area was densely wooded, and the deputies speculated that Dylan may have wandered off into the forest, either injured or disoriented. A full-scale search was launched that night, with search and rescue teams combing the nearby woods with flashlights, dogs, and thermal imaging drones. But despite their efforts, there was no trace of Dylan. Over the next several days, the search expanded. Helicopters flew overhead, volunteers joined the search teams, and local authorities continued to patrol the area. But as the days stretched into weeks, hope began to fade. There were no signs of struggle near the car, no footprints leading away, and no clues that might suggest where Dylan had gone. It was as though he had simply vanished into thin air. As the investigation continued, some strange details began to emerge. In the days leading up to his disappearance, Dylan had reportedly been making large cash withdrawals from his bank account, totaling nearly $15,000. Friends and family were baffled by this, as Dylan wasn't known to keep large sums of cash, and there was no indication of what he planned to do with the money. Tara told investigators that she hadn't seen any of the money at home and had no idea why Dylan had taken it out. More troubling, Dylan's co-workers mentioned that he had recently been talking about getting away for a while, although he hadn't specified where he wanted to go. Some thought he might have been planning to leave town, but he never made any concrete plans that anyone was aware of. There were also rumors that Dylan had gotten involved with some questionable people during a recent trip to Seattle, though no one knew for sure what those connections might have entailed. For months, the case remained at a standstill. Investigators continued to pursue leads, but none of them led anywhere. The area where Dylan had disappeared was searched multiple times, but no new evidence came to light. It seemed that Dylan Hartman had vanished without a trace. Then, in November of 2019, a hiker stumbled upon a set of human remains deep in the woods, about 15 miles from where Dylan's car had been found. The remains were badly decomposed, but the hiker notified authorities immediately. When the remains were retrieved and sent for testing, the medical examiner confirmed what many had feared: they belonged to Dylan Hartman. While this discovery brought some closure to his family, it only deepened the mystery surrounding his disappearance. The cause of death was listed as undetermined, as there were no obvious signs of trauma or foul play. Investigators speculated that Dylan may have succumbed to the elements, but the question of what or who he had been so afraid of that night remains unanswered. Some have suggested that Dylan's paranoia could have been a result of drug use, though his toxicology report came back clean. Others believe that Dylan may have had a mental breakdown or was suffering from some sort of psychological distress that led him to flee into the woods. But those closest to him insist that he wasn't the type to simply run away, and they remain convinced that someone or something was responsible for his death. To this day, no one knows what truly happened to Dylan Hartman on that dark road in the spring of 2017. His disappearance remains one of the most baffling cases in Oregon's history, and the unanswered questions continue to haunt those who knew and loved him. Until more evidence surfaces, the mystery of what happened that night may never be fully resolved. Story the end.